For 15 years, my world was a universe of two. Me and Mark. It wasn't just a marriage, it was a single, interwoven existence. We built our company, a boutique architectural firm called Synergy Designs, from a dusty room above a bakery. I was the heart, the creative force, the one who could walk into an empty space and see a home, a life. Mark was the face, the charismatic negotiator, the one who could sell my visions with a smile that could disarm armies. Our life was a carefully constructed blueprint of shared dreams. My days began before dawn, not with an alarm clock, but with the quiet hum of ideas in my head. I'd sketch on napkins over breakfast, on the back of receipts in the car. Every waking moment was dedicated to our creation. I remember the sacrifices like they were yesterday. We sold my grandmother's jewelry to afford the first set of drafting tables. We lived on instant noodles for a year to pay for our first business license. Our friends went on vacations, bought houses, had children. We bought better software, invested in a 3D printer, and poured every ounce of our energy and every cent we had back into the business. It wasn't a sacrifice to me. It was an investment in us. My love for him was etched into every blueprint, every late night spent reworking a design until it was perfect. He'd come into the studio late, bringing me cold coffee and a tired smile, and tell me I was a genius. He'd say, "You build the worlds, honey. I just sell the tickets." And I believed him. I believed in our synergy. My routine was a testament to that dedication. 5 a.m. wake up, a quick run to clear my head, and then straight to the studio. I'd work until Mark came in around 9, and then we'd have our daily strategy meeting. The afternoons were for client calls and site visits, and the evenings were for more work, often until midnight or later. It was an exhausting life, but it was ours, and I was deeply, profoundly happy. I thought our foundation was built on bedrock, on mutual respect, and a love that had weathered every storm. I had given him my youth, my creativity, my unwavering loyalty. I had given him everything. The day it all shattered started like any other Tuesday. I was in the middle of a presentation for the Harrison Project, a multi-million-dollar community center that was meant to be our masterpiece. I was in my element, pointing to the renderings, explaining how the light would fall through the atrium at different times of day. Mark was standing beside me, nodding, smiling that perfect smile. Then, the doors to the conference room opened. 2 men in dark suits, followed by 2 uniformed police officers, walked in. A hush fell over the room. One of the men, with a face like chiseled granite, asked, "Are you Sarah Jennings?" I remember nodding, my mouth suddenly dry. He slid a folder onto the polished table. "You're under arrest for 16 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." The words didn't make sense. It was like they were speaking a foreign language. I looked at Mark, expecting him to laugh, to tell them there was a mistake. But he didn't. He just stood there, his smile gone, replaced by a look of pity? No, it was colder than that. It was detachment. As they cuffed my hands behind my back, the blood drained from my face. My colleagues, people I'd mentored and worked with for years, stared at me with a mixture of horror and fascination. Their gazes were like tiny daggers. The lead investor, Mr. Harrison, a man who had praised my vision just minutes before, looked at me with pure contempt. I knew she was too good to be true. I heard him mutter to his associate. The cuffs were cold and heavy. But the heaviest thing was Mark's silence. As they led me out, I looked back at him, my eyes pleading. "Mark, say something. Tell them." He finally met my gaze, and in that instant I saw it all. There was no confusion, no anger on my behalf. There was only a chilling, calculated finality. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence was the confession. He had done this. He had orchestrated this. The man I had built my entire life around had just pushed me off the skyscraper we had built together. The humiliation was a physical force, pressing the air from my lungs. The walk through my own office, past the faces of my team, was the longest walk of my life. Each step was a fresh wave of shame. They were leading me away like a common criminal from the place I had called my second home, the company that was my baby. The betrayal wasn't just a knife in the back. It was the complete annihilation of my reality. Every memory, every shared laugh, every late night was now tainted, twisted into a lie. In that moment, My world vanished. It was the deepest pain I'd ever felt. If you've ever gone through a great disappointment and understand what it's like to be heartbroken, please like this video so I know I'm not alone on this journey. The weeks that followed were a descent into a gray, featureless hell. My life savings, our joint accounts, everything was frozen or, as I would soon discover, already emptied. Mark had been systematically siphoning funds for over 2 years, creating a complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts, all with digital trails leading directly to a terminal he had set up to mimic my own. He had been planning his exit, and my incarceration was the final, brutal step. I was released on bail, secured by the last bit of equity in my parents' home. I lost the company, my name was dragged through the mud in every financial paper, and the friends we shared suddenly had caller ID that didn't recognize my number. I moved into a tiny, damp basement apartment that smelled of mildew and despair. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. I'd spend hours just staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying that final look from Mark, trying to pinpoint the exact moment our love had become a lie. Was it all a lie? Had any of it been real? The questions ate me alive. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were haunted by the clang of a jail cell and the cold, judging eyes of everyone I had ever known. I was a ghost in my own life. My passion for architecture, once the fire that fueled me, was now just cold ash. How could I design spaces for people to live and connect in when my own life was a ruin, a monument to deceit? I tried to find work, but my name was poison. I was the synergy swindler. I took a job washing dishes in a greasy diner, my hands, which once drafted beautiful buildings, now raw and chapped from hot water and cheap soap. Every plate I scrubbed felt like a piece of my old life I was trying to clean, but the stain of Mark's betrayal was indelible. It was in this suffocating darkness that a small, persistent light began to flicker. It was Leo. My former assistant, Leo. In the high-powered world of Synergy Designs, Leo was practically invisible. He was quiet, painfully shy, and had a way of organizing files that everyone else found maddeningly complex, but he could find any document in under 30 seconds. He rarely spoke in meetings and was often the butt of jokes for his old-fashioned glasses and his habit of meticulously color-coding everything. Mark had always called him the simple one. I had always been kind to him, but I'd never truly seen him. After my arrest, he was the only one who came. He'd show up at my apartment door once a week, holding a cardboard box overflowing with files he'd managed to copy before he was fired. He'd just nod, set the box down, and leave. He never said much. "They're your designs, Sarah," he mumbled once. "The original files. Before the changes." I didn't have the heart to look at them at first. They were relics of a dead life. But one night, when the loneliness was a physical weight on my chest, I opened one of the boxes. It was filled with my initial project drafts, financial reports, and correspondence, all organized with Leo's bizarre but brilliant system of colored tabs and handwritten notes. As I sifted through the mountain of paper, a strange feeling washed over me. This was my work, my life. Underneath all the pain, the core of who I was in these boxes. And then I saw it. It wasn't a hidden document or a smoking gun. It was a pattern. Leo had cross-referenced everything. Expense reports were tabbed in blue, Mark's private meeting schedules in yellow, and wire transfer authorizations in red. Alone, they meant nothing. But laid out on the floor of my tiny apartment, Leo's system revealed a story. A red tab next to a yellow one. A transfer made on the exact day Mark had a secret meeting with a banker in the Cayman Islands, a meeting he had told me was a dental appointment. A blue tab for an extravagant expense report for client entertainment, on a day he was supposedly visiting his sick mother. It was a language of deceit, and Leo's organizational quirk was the Rosetta Stone. The man everyone dismissed, the one deemed too simple to matter, had, out of sheer methodical habit, created a perfect map of the crime. The spark wasn't in the files themselves, it was in the realization of what Leo had done. He had seen the truth not through cunning or ambition, but through quiet, unwavering diligence. His loyalty, his meticulous nature, the very things people ridiculed, were now my only lifeline. A fragile, flickering hope began to burn in the cold, empty space of my chest. My life wasn't over. It was just waiting to be reconstructed, and the blueprint was right here, on my floor, color-coded for clarity. The floor of my basement apartment became my new studio, my war room. The water-stained walls were soon covered with charts, timelines, and printouts, all connected by colored yarn like some desperate detective movie. But this wasn't a movie. It was my life. Leo and I became an unlikely team. He'd come over after his new job as a library clerk, his arms full of more documents he'd managed to legally request, and I'd have coffee and sandwiches waiting. We worked for months, fueled by a shared, unspoken belief that the truth mattered. It was the hardest work I had ever done. It wasn't the creative, joyful work of designing a building. It was the painstaking, soul-crushing work of deconstructing a lie. I had to learn about forensic accounting, about IP tracking, about the labyrinthine world of international banking. I read law books until my eyes burned. There were days I wanted to give up, to just plead guilty, and let the system swallow me. The weight of what Mark had done was suffocating. But then I'd look at Leo, quietly cross-referencing a stack of receipts, his brow furrowed in concentration, and I'd find a new reserve of strength. He never doubted me. Not once. His steady, quiet faith became my anchor. My court-appointed lawyer, a well-meaning but overworked man named Mr. Davies, was skeptical. He advised me to take a plea deal. "Sarah, the evidence against you is overwhelming," he'd say, gesturing to the prosecution's neat binders. This yarn on the wall is not a legal strategy." I tried to explain what we were finding, the patterns, the hidden connections. He'd just sigh and shake his head. He saw Leo as a well-meaning but simple-minded friend, not a key to my defense. It was up to us. The first victory, the first real crack in Mark's perfect facade, came at 3 a.m. Leo was examining high-resolution scans of capital expenditure authorizations, documents I had supposedly signed to approve massive purchases for overseas projects. He had them magnified on his old laptop screen, flipping between them for hours. Suddenly, he froze. "Here," he whispered, pointing. "Look at this." I leaned in. On 15 of the 16 signatures, the S in Sarah was perfect, a confident, sweeping curve, just like I wrote it. But on one, the signature from the pivotal Dubai transfer, the loop of the S was almost imperceptibly different. It was hesitant, tighter. "It's a forgery," I breathed. "A damn good one, but it's not mine." Mr. Davies dismissed it as circumstantial. But for us, it was everything. It was the first lie we could prove. It was the loose thread, and we started to pull. We used that one document to petition for access to the original server logs from Mark's terminal. For weeks, we fought legal battles just to get the data. When we finally got it, it was a mountain of code. But Leo, who had taught himself basic coding in his spare time, found it. A tiny piece of ghost software, a mirroring program that allowed Mark to perfectly replicate my digital activity and execute commands as if he were me. It was the gun, and it was still smoking. This discovery was the turning point. When we presented this to Mr. Davies, his entire demeanor changed. The skepticism in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of shock, and then, of dawning belief. He finally saw what I saw, that the quiet man with the color-coded tabs was a genius in his own right. We weren't just defending anymore. We were building a case. We started helping other people, just small cases at first. A woman from my diner job was being evicted by a landlord who claimed she'd never paid rent. She had receipts, but they were a jumbled mess. Leo spent a weekend organizing them into a clear, chronological portfolio. When she presented it to the housing authority, the case was dismissed immediately. Seeing the look of relief on her face, the way she hugged me with tears in her eyes, rekindled something in me. It was the feeling I used to get when a family first walked into a home I designed. It was a sense of purpose. I wasn't just fighting for my own life anymore. I was fighting for the idea that truth, no matter how buried, deserves to be seen. It was there, with my own hands, that I began to rewrite my story. I stopped being the victim and became the author of my destiny. If my comeback journey is inspiring you, subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters and be part of this community of new beginnings. The day of the trial felt surreal. After more than a year of living in the shadows, I was back in the spotlight, but this time it was the harsh, unforgiving glare of a courtroom. Mark was there, across the room, sitting with his high-priced legal team. He looked tanned, rested, and confident. He even managed to give me a small, sad smile, as if we were two old friends on opposite sides of a friendly tennis match. The audacity of it still steals my breath. The prosecution presented its case, and it was brutal. They painted me as a greedy, manipulative mastermind. They had documents, emails, transfer authorizations, all with my name, my digital signature on them. With each piece of evidence they presented, I could feel the jury's opinion hardening against me. I could hear the whispers in the gallery. My own lawyer, Mr. Davies, did his best, but he was outmatched by Mark's slick corporate attorneys. The turning point was supposed to be when we presented our evidence of the server mirroring and the forgeries. But Mark's lawyers were brilliant. They spun it as a desperate, last-ditch effort, a conspiracy theory cooked up by a guilty woman. They brought in their own tech expert who called our findings inconclusive and amateurish. I felt the hope we had so carefully built begin to crumble. The prosecution rested its case, and the air in the courtroom was thick with my guilt. Mr. Davies leaned over. "Sarah," he whispered, his face grim, "it's not looking good." And then came the moment that the title of my life story was written. Mr. Davies, in a move of quiet desperation, called his final witness to the stand. The defense calls Leo Martinez. A ripple of confused murmurs went through the courtroom. Who? Leo walked slowly towards the witness stand, his old briefcase clutched in his hands. He looked small and terrified. Mark's lead attorney actually smirked. I heard someone behind me whisper to their neighbor, "That's her old assistant. He's not smart enough to defend her." They were right. Leo wasn't there to defend me in the way they understood. He wasn't a slick talker. He was there to show the truth. Mark's lawyer started the cross-examination with condescending softness. "Mr. Martinez, you were Ms. Jennings' personal assistant. Is that correct? You handled her scheduling? Her filing?" "Yes," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "And you have no formal training in finance? Or cybersecurity?" "No, sir." The lawyer smiled at the jury. "Yet you believe you, a simple filer, have uncovered a grand conspiracy that has eluded teams of professional forensic accountants." He was trying to paint Leo as a delusional, simple-minded loyalist. But he underestimated him. He underestimated his preparation. When it was Mr. Davies' turn, he simply asked, "Mr. Martinez, could you please show the court the contents of your briefcase?" Leo opened his case and began to take out large, meticulously prepared poster boards. He didn't speak to the lawyers or the judge. He turned and spoke directly to the jury. He wasn't eloquent. He stumbled over his words. But he was clear. On the first board was a timeline. On one side, in blue, were my documented activities, meetings, phone calls, site visits. On the other side, in red, were the fraudulent transfers. "You see," he said, pointing with a shaky finger. "The largest transfer, the one for $7 million, was authorized from Sarah's computer at 2:17 p.m. on May 12th. But here's a photo from the security camera at the Harrison construction site. It's time-stamped 2:17 p.m. And that's Sarah. She was 40 miles away from the office." He then put up another board. It was a complex web of lines and boxes connecting shell companies to offshore accounts. Mark's lawyer said these were random, but they're not. He pointed to the names of the companies: Jennings Holdings, Synergy Ventures. They all use variations of Sarah's name or the company's name to make it look like she was involved. But the incorporation papers, they were all filed by a law firm in Panama, the same firm that Mark's brother works for. He didn't present theories. He presented facts. Irrefutable, color-coded facts. The final board was a massive, magnified image of the two signatures, the real one and the forgery. "An expert said you can't be sure," Leo said softly. "But I'm not an expert. I just filed every document Sarah signed for 6 years. I know her signature. I know the way the ink flows when she's confident. This," he pointed to the forgery, "is the signature of someone who is afraid. Someone who is copying." There was a dead silence in the courtroom. No one was snickering anymore. They were all leaning forward, looking at the boards, at this quiet man who had laid out the anatomy of a massive fraud with nothing more than paper, colored ink, and the power of observation. I looked over at Mark. His tan couldn't hide the pale, sickened look on his face. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of being truly seen. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Leo, the invisible man, the simple one, who had just dismantled his entire world. The confrontation wasn't me screaming at him. It was me watching him be exposed by the pure, simple truth. When the jury came back with a verdict, not guilty on all counts, the sound didn't even register at first. It was only when Leo put a gentle hand on my arm that I realized I was crying. My legacy wasn't Synergy Designs. It wasn't the buildings or the awards. My legacy began in that courtroom. We started a new firm, Martinez and Jennings. We're not architects. We're forensic investigators. We help people who have been tangled in lies, people who have been framed and dismissed by the system. We take the complex and make it simple. We find the truth hidden in the details. Leo is the heart of the operation. His mind sees the patterns no one else can. I'm the face, just like before, but this time, I'm not selling a vision. I'm fighting for people. I found a new kind of peace, a quiet, solid foundation built not on shared dreams with another person, but on my own resilience and the profound strength of an unlikely friendship. I learned that the strongest structures aren't built with steel and glass, but with loyalty and truth. Today, I understand that the wounds of the past don't define who we are, but what we do with them does. I'm so grateful you've listened to my story this far. If it touched you, share it with someone who needs a little light and leave a comment with a word of strength and hope. Together, we are stronger.